Hey, welcome back everybody. So congrats on the completion of the first hour. And what do you think? I'm asking because if you were okay to follow along with this, you're gonna be good to go for the rest of, I say the rest, for everything that's following until we get to the end. This is the pace that I set. And some of the actions that we used are gonna be used again and again because, as you know, in 3D, there is no secret sauce magic. It's just a lot of repetition, making use of the tools that we have in the most efficient way. And that is exactly what we were doing. And I also already wanted to show you early on how to make use of our remeasure modifier stack. And for those of you that are already familiar with it, you know that the low poly model that we have finished, for example, for our buffer tube, once we apply the modifier stack for the remeasure, we automatically have our high poly already finished in front of us. So this is the beauty of this workflow. And it means that whenever we have a low poly piece finished, all we have to do is enable the modifier stack on it. Yes, we do have to set some crease edges in order for that to work. And that's basically all. So we do our low poly and our high poly at the very same time, essentially. And that means that once we are finished with our low poly model, we are already finished with our high poly model as well. That's why the buffer tube got the remeasure modifier stack applied to it. And right now we only have one folder called low poly, okay? And later we're gonna just make another folder called high poly, and we basically just copy and paste everything that we did for the low poly in there. And that way we have two folders then, low poly and high poly. So that was the buffer tube that we already pretty much finished now. And now we're working on the stock, and we will continue to work on the stock now in the second hour. And if the pace was okay for you, you're gonna be good to go. Okay, let's continue. Okay, we continue by zooming out and going out of the isolation mode. And then we select our reference image. And you might notice that it's the updated reference image. I had to re-record that segment because I had a corrupted file scene. Let's copy the reference image, and then by pressing right mouse button, you can let it snap back into place. So now the original recording will continue. Don't let it confuse you. I'm gonna drag that a little bit in front of the other. It doesn't really matter how much. I'm going into isolation mode here with this copied reference image, and I'm gonna put the rotation to 6 on the y-axis and zoom in here on this element on the stock. So I'm gonna use a cylinder, press shift to make sure it's a perfect cylinder, and then we just wanna sort of get the same size that we had there. It doesn't have to be 100% the same what I have. Gonna put the Y rotation to 0, everything else to 90, and 20 vertices on that cylinder. So just make sure it looks like it's fitting into our reference image there. And then in edge mode, we're gonna make subdivisions here through these. So we have two new loops now. We select it as face, and then interactive tools, you wanna use the quick lattice. Not the one that I'm using there. Well, it's the same. Remember, on the transform tab at the upper right, you can always see my properties, but it doesn't have to match 100%. Let's go to object mode and delete the lattice modifier and also this bracket. And we go to move tool. And then back in edit mode, let's extrude that out here at the back and delete the selection. Let's take these faces here. If you press Ctrl, you can select multiple at the same time. So I'm gonna extrude, right mouse button to snap it back, and then move it to the left, and followed by SX0 to make a vertical alignment. And then we can already optimize a bit here by dissolving these edges that we don't need. Same here on that side. There's a lot of edges that don't contribute anything to our overall shape. So that means we're getting rid of them early on, because that way we don't have to spend so much time later with the optimization. Let's drag that further out here. So let's use the bevel on that edge here. And then we go over to vertex and position it down here. And then we're gonna use our knife tool, press K, and then press X to align it and Y to align it down here. Unfortunately, it doesn't record with the recording tool which axis I'm aligning it towards. Extrude, right mouse button to snap back, drag out. You're gonna see me doing that a lot. So now that edge we can dissolve here, and that already gives us a bit more of that shape. We bring that up a bit here. And these edges here we can dissolve. So these ones, they need to be round. Let's take a look at our reference. We can see that this is a bit beveled there. So we're gonna do the same thing. And let's give that 4 segments. Actually, let me do that again a bit further out here with 5 segments. Dissolve. And then let's make some connections here while we're at it. So again, with Control, I'm extruding, right mouse to snap back, and SX0 to align. And then we dissolve these vertex points here. And the same here for these edges. But let's also take the ones here at the back. X-ray mode makes it easier to select, and then we dissolve these edges here as well. Gonna select that vertex point here. Make sure it's only selected at the front, because we also have geometry at the back. And this one I'm gonna bring up a bit. So let's take a look at what that looks like. I'm gonna dissolve this and bring that over a bit. So that makes it a little bit of an angled geometry that we have there on that face that you see. So again, the knife tool, by pressing Y, will make it perfectly aligned. And then we connect that over here. And then we can select this face over here. I know it's not perfectly straight right now, but we're gonna do that in a moment. Extrude, right mouse button to snap back, drag it out and align it on the X-axis. And now we can go over to vertex mode, position that here, and do the same thing here. Extrusion. In that case, we didn't need to let it snap back because it's already perfectly aligned. Let's take these verts here. Again, we're in X-ray mode, so we also select what's on the other side at the back. And we can dissolve these edges here. Remember, the lesser edges we have in our blockout phase, which is what you could describe that still, the easier it is to work with. So let's push these over a bit here. I'm in face mode right now for that. We want it to be aligned there a little bit with this other piece that is sticking out. And now we make a loop selection on that piece. And we give it a few segments here. You can see my properties there at the corner. And now we have a bit of some manual adjusting to do here on that back end. And this edge, let's see, let's just dissolve it so that it's easier to give this here a bevel. And then we can just reconnect it. Same here at the bottom. Super Smart Create to connect. I love Super Smart Create. It's just such a useful tool. That's why I have it mapped on my mouse button. Dissolve some edges here. And also this loop that we don't really need. And this edge can also go because it's already a planar face, so we don't need that extra edge there. So let's further connect some things here. And also here, while being in X-ray mode, we just make this bracket selection and press Super Smart Create to get these edges in there. And same thing here. While pressing Shift, we select multiple verts. And like I said before, this is always a huge chunk of the work to make sure that everything is properly connected. That is our edge flow, essentially. So this is maybe a bit too thick there, so I'm pushing that over a bit more. And then here in that view, we can take these verts for everything. And I'm gonna also bring that out a bit here to the outside, basically. A bit more manual repositioning here, followed by some more connections here for our vertex points. This piece is quite a bit challenging, as you can see. It's very small, but oftentimes it's the small elements, something like that here, where we really have to think a bit outside of the box on what's the best approach for it. And that's what makes every piece so interesting. Every single element is its own challenge. And that's why I love 3D. I'm gonna give this here a bevel. And this one here too, but only with 2 segments. Remember, you can use the mouse wheel to do these bevel segments. I hope I mentioned that before. We are gonna make some more super smart creations here, or connections, I should say. And also here on that side, but let's just go over here to triangulate faces, which we can also do to make these connections, but often I just prefer to do that manually. So that, for example, like here, that we have these edges nice and horizontal and not all over the place. So here again, Super Smart Create, and also over here. And then here, let's just do again triangulate faces at the back. And also over here. And this is shaping up well. So I'm getting out of isolation mode and just drag it in front of the stock. It doesn't have to be perfectly positioned yet. We do that later. I deleted that secondary reference image that we had copied. So now we're left with the original one. Let's go back to our stock. I'm taking it into isolation and you can see that, and the reference image reveals that our geometry is a little bit too far in there. So I'm gonna dissolve these edges, and the way that I approach that is by giving that a bevel here. Make sure to have it almost connecting here with these edges, and then we take these faces, switch it to edge mode and dissolve these edges. So that way we brought it further here to the front, And now we can just dissolve these edges here that are a bit further out. And we're left with the same element, but these inside faces brought out a bit more. So far, if you looked at my reference image in the recording, you see that I had this element there. And you can see there are different types of looks for this inside piece there of the stalk. And here in Photoshop, where I assembled our reference image, I was actually changing it now to this element, which I think looks much nicer. So we're gonna have this. And now back in Blender, I have it updated on my end. On your end, it's already updated anyway because you have the latest version of my reference. But these references are an organic process. They grow as we go. So I'm gonna have a cylinder here with 24 sides for this. And let's take these faces, extrude, snap back, drag it out, followed by SX and 0 to flatten it. And then here on the green transform gizmo, we just scale it down a bit. Extrude that out. And now let's make a connection here in the center. Delete the left side, and our pivot is perfectly there in the center, so we can then add a mirror and we get that here. So let's go to rotate, and we rotate and position this here accordingly. And then let's take these verts and drag them a bit further down here. Now in X-ray, let's just take it and push it in a bit because this is not really coming so far out. I delete the mirror modifier, extrude it back out here on that element. So that selection, we're gonna give an inset, followed by an extrusion here to the inside. And let's take it to isolate. And we want to push these vertex here a bit further into the stalk. And now we're gonna, with Shift, also select the stalk. And then we can make a Boolean with a union and say apply all cutters. So now let's go back here to this. And we can just put that to a 0 right there at 0 and delete the faces. And let me check what's going on. We still have this side here on. Let's just delete the right side. Again, make sure to not delete anything that we actually need. Just on the right side. And now with the mirror back on, we have this here in place, and we can further do some optimization already. I'm gonna delete that edge that we had there because it's close enough to the other edge that we just added throughout the Boolean. But first, before we connect, let's make that a bit more smooth here. Or beveled, I should say. Connect this down here. And then the rest of the verts we connect over like this. So now here at the upper part, let's see what happens if we connect it like that and bevel. And you can see it reaches too far there to the outside. So I'm dissolving that, connect it like this, and then I'm gonna give it a bevel here. And I'm gonna have 3 segments for it. We have to be flexible with these, the amount of the segments. Gonna dissolve that vert, connect it like this. And now let's take this vertex point and we copy the X coordinate at 5.386. And then we can select all these faces here. And you already know the drill, SX0, to straighten that perfectly. And now we paste 5.386 in there so that it's all at the same coordinates on the x-axis. And we can then continue here to make our connections. which somehow works best in the X-ray mode. Sometimes it's just not letting me select if I'm not in X-ray. So that's why you see me switching a lot. We continue here by refining a bit the shape that we have there. So while being in vertex mode, and I'm going to dissolve this so that it's easier for us here to bevel that without adding this triangle n-gon there in the center. That's why I sometimes like to just dissolve edges while we are still doing bevel. And then super smart create once again to optimize and connect. Well, optimize and connect is basically the same thing. Let's also dissolve that here and then connect over here after some adjustments. Dissolve edge, and then we can bevel it. And same as before, we use the super smart create to connect it. So on the reference, we can see that this here is also beveled where it's going in. So in that case, we're going to do like this here. And over here, let's give it 3 segments. Dissolve these vertex points there and connect it back like that. So now I'm going to connect it here vertically like that. And over here, also make a connection. And then we want to take the vertex coordinate here from this one, copy it, take all these faces, and SX0, same as before, and then we paste it back in there. So now we have these here aligned and all straightened out. And we can just do some more connections. Same as here. And that way we have this element already pretty much established. And we can continue to also work on this piece here. And it's going to be more simple as the other one. Let's just create a cylinder. And I'm going to put it to 18 sides. So I'm going to make a connection here in the center. And then I'm going to give this a slight bevel, this edge loop there in the center. And then we can just take it and push over here to the right. And that pretty much gives us our Boolean operator. And I'm just going to copy this element. That's a copy. And we're going to rotate it. Let's get out of the X-ray mode so that we can better see how this is aligned here. We want to make sure that the distance there is looking even. And that should be it. And now we select both of these objects that we have here. Go into edit mode with it so that we can just push that over here on the x-axis so that this is going all the way through our stalk. Now we also select the stalk and just make a difference operation. Let's apply these cutters. So you will notice that after Boolean, Blender automatically sets at least 2 edges. And sometimes these edges we can then not dissolve. So I connect first over here like that, how I want it, and then I can dissolve. And the same thing here at the bottom. Make a connection like this, and then we can dissolve that one. It sometimes won't work otherwise, so that way we get to make a better connection here. And before we connect more, let's take this loop, both here at the bottom and top, and let's give it a bevel. So we're gonna bevel it as far as possible without intersecting there at the bottom into the other edges. And now we see that here at the bottom, it's actually not 100% perfectly aligned, at least on my end. So I'm gonna take these face selections here, and then we can manually adjust it, bring it up a little bit here like that. And also a slight rotation here. So now it looks much better as before. And we have a bit more of this chamfered shape there. Remember, the word chamfer is the same as bevel in Blender. The word chamfer comes from the chamfer modifier in 3D Max. Well, at least that's where I got it from. So if you're curious what chamfer zone means, it basically means bevel zone. But these days, nobody knows what chamfer means because most people are on Blender. And yeah, it's a little bit of a bummer because now my company name is something that a lot of people just scratch their head when you mention that name. Okay, that just as a side note. Meanwhile, I'm doing some connections here. And here at the upper part, let's take these vertex points here on the right side. And then on the left side, we connect it over like this. And yes, we could be much faster if we did the simple triangulate faces action. But like I said before, I sometimes just want to manually do that in order to get a look that also looks good on the wireframe when zoomed out and not just randomly put. So this is all shaping up pretty nicely here. Let's go back here to this element. And I got the impression that this here is too low poly. So instead of doing it all again, we're gonna make use of this smooth action again. Select these and subdivide it all the way through and put the smoothness amount to 1. So you can see that this gives us a little bit of a rounder shape, but we have to manually then align the front vertex to the back vertex. Unfortunately, this smooth action is a little bit messy that way. I wish it was just like a perfect, how should I say, a perfect subdivision. But yeah, this is just something that we have to do sometimes then. So now we have this a bit more high poly looking there. And by high poly, I mean before it was just not enough edges. You could actually see the single steps, and that's nothing that we want on a first-person AAA weapon. So a quick look at our reference here shows us that we need to also add this smaller cylinder here, which connects to that switch that we already created. Let's just use the cylinder tool again here. Drag that out there. Let's give that 12 sides. In that case, because it's so small and it's also hidden there, we barely ever see it. So we keep it then lower poly. And let's position that here, something like that. And in that case, I'm not even sure if I want to have a Boolean operation on it. We're probably just gonna leave it like this. So yeah, we don't need Boolean because that would just complicate things and we don't really need that for that. So let's position that so that these faces there are aligned with our stock and that switch here. And then let's give it a rotation according to our original reference image. Remember, before we created it in a straight way to make it easier for us. And the reference shows that this here is a bit cut in there. So we go to object mode, create that cube here. And that's going to be our Boolean operator. Let's go back to edit mode here on that. And then in the X-ray mode, let's transform that so that it's resembling the shape that we see there. Bring that down here. And this a little bit to the right. And now we're going to take the whole vertex points at the back and push that in just a bit. And now it's time for the Boolean operation. Let's apply that. And I guess we could add another edge here. So I added an edge with Super Smart Create. I bring that over here. And now on that face, we just extrude it up. So that way it's really as realistic as it can be for this element. And we're going to leave it at that. We don't need that to be any higher poly than we have there, because we hardly ever see it. And this edge loop we can get rid of, so further optimization. This goes over there. And let's also connect it here on the side that we actually see something of. So let's take a look at our silhouette. This is definitely shaping up nicely. And I guess these edges we can just dissolve these two. So looking at it here from our back view, even though I might refer to it as the front view in some cases, because technically we're looking at it from the front, but in Blender it's the back view. So we delete the right side and put our mirror back on. And sometimes the reference image is in the way here. So what I want to do with that, select the reference, and here in the properties, we put it to front. So that way, it's not going to be in the way anymore when we rotate. So earlier I deleted the right side, and by that I accidentally deleted this part. So I'm extruding these edges out and put it to 0, and the same here. So let's take a look at the back side of our stock. And you can see on the reference image that we need to work in some of these details here. These are too big to just put them in the normal map. So I want to have actual geometry there. And we use our cylinder tool once again. And you can see here my dimensions and the positioning. I'm gonna put it to a 20 sides. Make sure it's at 0 on X at the transform tab. And I'm just gonna put the dimensions so that it's 12 on X and Y. And while we're at it, on Z, let's put it to 8. 12, 12, and 8. So you can see this sort of aligns there with the other edge, which is good. And I'm gonna make a copy of it. And then let's just take it so that these edges there are sort of aligned at the upper part. If you take a look at it, it's gonna make it a bit easier for us once we do the Boolean on it. So let's go to Boolean while we're at it. Difference, apply. And this one here is easy because there was no intersecting edges. So we can just connect it here like that. And then here at the bottom, let's zoom in there where we positioned it already. And it looks like it already merged it because I didn't put the Boolean to precise. And that way it automatically merges if something is in close proximity. Just double check. If you have two vertex points very close by each other, you just want to make sure they are merged together. So I'm gonna connect it so that we have our loop going all the way through the center again on both of these cuts that we just made. And be careful once we delete one side, because like I said before, always double check. We don't want to end up deleting more than we have to. And I put the mirror back on here and have a good old rotation around to check our silhouette. And followed by that, we're gonna select the full loop here and scale it. This is not a bevel, this is just a bit of scaling. You can see my properties there at the corner left, the resize. And here we're gonna do the same thing. And remember that my stalk is still missing this little piece that we added there where it's sort of extending out right there where we're currently working at. So I'm gonna go over here to vertex slide, another feature that we haven't used yet. And that ensures that these vertex points are sliding, as the name suggests, on the given edge where we tell it like, okay, we want to go in this way. And that way we can refine that here a bit, space it out a little bit more. And yeah, I'm gonna add this piece back there once I realize it. So your version is the correct one. I'm gonna connect this here and I'm gonna select these faces and triangulate faces, right click again, twist to quads. So that saves us a bit of time. We don't have to do everything manually. So let's do the same thing here, triangulate faces and twist to quads. That just saves us a bit of time and we don't really need to do everything manually. But in cases like this here, I want to have the control and connect it here like that. And let's optimize by removing these edge loops there that we don't need. We still had those because we were extruding earlier, and that left these extra edges there. So I'm gonna give this here a bit of a bevel and push it in a bit more. So here we are in our back view once again. And I am gonna delete everything on the right side and reapply our mirror. And let's zoom in here and use the edge slide once again to bring that further down. So I'm just mentioning it again, your version already has these extra edges there at the bottom added. I'm gonna show you in a moment what it should look like once we add our crease to it. So now we go to select sharp edges. We're gonna leave it at a 30-degree angle sharpness and put the crease to 1. And now we can select the full loop here at the end and just put it back to 0. And we zoom in here and also put that to 0. And this is where I want it to be a hard crease. So I'm gonna put it to 1. And around these edges here, we can put it also to a full crease. So let's put that to 1 there at the back of the stock and this loop here as well. So the plan is to prepare that here for our remeasure modifier stack once again. Because like I mentioned before, we're gonna make a high poly out of everything once we're reaching the final low poly stages, which is where we're at now here pretty much now with our stock. Let's also add a crease here. You have to think of it like that. Wherever we want to keep an edge or a certain angle, we put the crease. And we can also add the crease to emphasize a little bit, to have it more hard edged at some areas. So wherever we have it in that color put to 1, we pretty much have our high poly edge then established. This one here I'm gonna put to 0, and then we're gonna define our hard edge right here around it, sort of like a framing. So we put that to 1. And here at the front of our stock, let's see how we best do that. I'm actually gonna put these edges here to 1. And then I'm also taking this whole loop here into our crease. So let's put that to 1. And I just noticed I didn't triangulate that here, this face. So let's do that now. Triangulate faces, tris to quads. Technically, we could just leave it at triangles, but I prefer to work with quads as long as we can. Otherwise, it's just cluttering our scene too much. But at the end, everything gets triangulated either way, so it doesn't really make much difference. So I'm gonna crease this there at the bottom too. And now I'm just gonna quickly show you the version that you're currently looking at, which is the right one, okay? So this is how you can set the crease there. Mine still doesn't have these 2 edges. It's a bit annoying that I didn't notice that earlier. These things sometimes happen when you're recording a course like that. So let's go back to object mode. And I'm gonna use our awesome modifier list plugin on our buffer tube, which makes it easy to just toggle back on the whole stack by pressing that little button where I had my mouse cursor. Now I select the stock and press Shift on the buffer tube, Ctrl L, and copy modifiers. So that copy and pastes the full modifier stack over here onto our stock. And the first side reveals that there are some issues. So for instance, we have some overlapping here. And that can easily be fixed by zooming in, taking these 2 edges, and earlier I forgot to give that a crease. So that needs to be put to a 1. And then we have another overlap situation right there. So again, it was 1 edge that I forgot. Let's put that also to 1. And here that doesn't look good. Something is going on there. We call that pinching. This is some pinching, and we can avoid that by adding another edge in here with our knife tool. And we connect it up here. So now we have some sort of a frame there. We delete these 2 edges and bring them down here like so. We reconnect it. And now let's go take a look here in object mode. We always have to be in object mode in order to preview our remeasure stack. And that looks much better now. But there is another case of pinching. And same as before, 2 little edges that need some crease information put to 1. So that's it. The stock is all high polyed up, and it might actually look too hard edged right now, which is something we want to avoid. So in some cases we want that type of look, but in that case it's better to go to the corrective smooth and put it from 0.1 to 0.5. So that takes a moment to load, but you see right now it did it. And it's looking a bit more smooth. I forgot an edge loop here for our crease, so let's crease that. And here on that element, it's a little bit too little there, the distance. So I'm gonna select all these faces and push them down a slight bit with our transform gizmo. So that looks better now. And it's certainly more smooth now. And that's what you would expect from something like a stock, which is all made out of plastic. I'm gonna give this the proper name here as well. Stock underscore low. And this one, stock underscore switch underscore low. And then this small piece, stock underscore cylinder 1 low. And this one is going to be our cylinder 2 low. And let's drag that into our underscore low folder. And we also still have these little cylinders left to do here for our high poly. So I'm going to use quick favorites to select the sharp edges and put the crease to 1. And then in object mode, select our buffer tube and copy and paste the modifier stack. You can access this menu also when you press Ctrl and L. But I highly recommend using the quick favorites. Takes a moment to load. And despite looking messed up, it's too high the resolution. I'm putting that to 8. And we can then delete the mirror modifier, which copied over from our buffer tube, but we don't need it on that part. I really apologize for this fragmentation. There's nothing I could do. I tried to export it without it, but it just wouldn't let me. I'm gonna dissolve these edges because they are on a planar surface and don't contribute anything. Let's make an edge connection here in the center, and we go to edge mode. And then we right click, go to interactive tools and say quick origin. And that puts the pivot right in the center of it. And I also have that mapped on the Q key. So if I press Q, you will see that the pivot is now here, just to demonstrate it to you. But we want it to be here, so I'm pressing Q again there. I could make a lot of use of my hotkeys, but I prefer to show it to you in the menus. So select sharp edges. And now we have some edges that we need to add by pressing Shift and deselect also by pressing Shift. Put the crease to 1. And this one actually I also don't want to have. So I'll put that down to 0. This one, however, we certainly need. So we're gonna put it to 1. I guess it was already late when I did that recording because I forgot to put a crease there to this edge. So please edit where I pointed it out. And meanwhile, let's continue here by adding more crease where we need it. And now I want to demonstrate to you how we can put that pivot point over to 0, but only the pivot. If we use the transform and put it to 0, everything moves. So let's undo that. And now we go into the pivot only mode by pressing Ctrl and the dot key. So now we enable the snap to grid, put the magnet on, and we can simply move it over here, just the pivot point. So we have to press Ctrl and dot again to get out of this mode. Don't forget that. And now we have this perfectly centered here at 0, this object. And the reason why we do that is because we want to put a mirror on it for the other side. And for that, the pivot had to be at 0. I'm gonna also copy our modifier stack on there now. And let's mirror it over to the other side. And we have an issue here. The problem is it needs a Control A and apply the rotation. So that fixes our X form, as it was called in 3D Max, and lets us just copy it over, or mirror it over, I should say. So here's another piece that still needs some crease information here. Let me get out of the grid mode, the snap mode, and we're going to reposition that a bit here. It doesn't have to extend into that piece so much. Now this one says X is already at 0, but that can't be. So we say Control T and say all transforms, and now it reveals that X is actually at 4 and we put it at 0. And I'm gonna press Q. If you remember, that puts the quick pivot there. Otherwise, you can also access this through the interactive tools. Right click, interactive tools, quick pivot. Now I'm gonna copy the modifiers from that switch element over here to this one. And now we just have to crease it. And same as this loop here. Let's go to X-ray mode. Otherwise it's hard to select, and also crease it. And it looks a little bit strange. We're gonna put the mirror on top of our stack. And now this looks better. So I'm gonna take a look around here. And this is when I realized what I already pointed out earlier in the notification, that I forgot to crease this edge here. So putting that to 1 as it should be makes it look better, at least from the side, because you can see that there are some issues there. And what I want to do is put our remeasure resolution to 10. That will make it look very hard edged, which is also not what we want. So I'm gonna put the corrective smooth to a 0.5 here on the factor. And the repetition amount, I'm gonna put it to 250. So that helps to smoothen it out more. And now this is looking much better. If you would zoom in closely, you would still see a bit of it, but that's nothing that should worry us for our normal map bake. You won't ever see that. So by now you can see I added this back, what I was missing before, because I somehow reloaded a scene where I didn't have that yet. And let's also not forget this small element there, which is some sort of a bump that we have there at the end of the stalk, which right now is still missing. So I'm gonna go back here by disabling our remeasure modifier stack, use the knife tool, and zoom in here and press enter to confirm. So we want that edge parallel to the other one. And now we can select these faces, use inset, and press Control to push it out like that. And let's dissolve this edge because it's better to connect it over here to this one. So let me check also this here. I'm actually going to dissolve these edges. And we can do that in a better way. But first, let's dissolve this edge. So let's crease it, and also this loop here. And now I want to also dissolve it here at the bottom. And basically just make with Super Smart Create a connection all the way through here. And I'm merging these words that we had there. And I just reposition it a bit here as seen from our back view. Gonna use the edge slide here on that. or vertex slide actually. We just want to make sure that our edge flow is as nice as it can be. And that will benefit our later overall look. The sum of all these things that we do here. So just make sure that this is all having an even spacing. And that edge here also needs to have a crease on it. So some of that work is always a little bit tedious, but when we put the crease, we really have to take our time. And I also want to take my time to show you where I put the crease and where I put my connections. And finally, I realized that I forgot this edge there. You might have already seen it. And this one, let's also give it a crease. So now we can take another look here by re-enabling our visibility. Yeah, sometimes you have to press it 2 times so that first it turns off and then it turns on. And yes, it always takes a moment to load. So give it some time. Blender is not freezing up on you, it's just a remeasure. So here we got to take that edge that we pushed out with the inset earlier. And I do want to delete this face here. Take that and put that to a 0 here on that thing. So now this is where it should be. And let's give it another look here with our remeasure. And it's loading. At that point of time, I was still showing you how long it also takes on my end. But later, I'm fast forwarding maybe through some of these parts so that I'm not making you wait forever here just to see the remeasure loading. So comparing it to our reference image shows that we did a perfect job. It pretty much looks 1-to-1, and that's the standard we're going for. I'm disabling the remeasure stack, only leave the mirror on for every piece that we made. Disable, only put mirror when we need it, same here. And the reason is that otherwise it would simply take too long to load. And instead we're just gonna reload the remeasure when we need it later. So here's our next piece, the CastleNut, which is where the buffer tube is going in, or is one of the elements where it's screwed around, I should say. And we're gonna start with the cylinder. Put that to 17.5 radius, and I'm gonna have it at a 48 sides for the vertices, and we put the depth to a 10. So that gives us exactly the dimensions that I found online. I'm gonna rotate that and then press Ctrl A and say all transforms to get the pivot back into place as it should be. So I'm gonna take the buffer tube into isolation mode just for a moment, because I want to demonstrate to you that this pivot point from the buffer tube, this is where we need our CastleNut to be perfectly aligned to. So we press Shift on the buffer tube and say selection to active. And that will put that cylindrical element for our buffer tube perfectly in place at the same pivot point as the buffer tube. Let's take these faces and with an inset, we bring it exactly to where our buffer tube starts, as seen from the front. And now we can just extrude these edges out here and then bring them over here to that side, select all these vertex points together and say merge by distance. And it needs to say removed 48 vertices. Then it did the job properly. Always pay attention to what this number at the bottom says when doing some welding or merging. So now we can position that back into place here and continue to work on it. I'm gonna add an edge loop in the center and put that over here where we see on the reference we have some cuts in that thing. And now I'm gonna take these faces here, and with Shift I'm gonna also select the ones here at the top and at the bottom. And now with that selection, I'm just gonna delete it and fill it. So take the loop, press F to fill, and then we can simply go over here and make Super Smart Create on these selections. Make sure you're in X-ray mode. And same here, Super Smart Create, Super Smart Create. And that pretty much gives us already the shape that we're after. Let's take these edges here on the outside, and we want to give it quite the bevel here. So let's give this at least 2 segments, even though it's pretty small. But this is one of these elements where the player is going to see it. And we're already on to the next piece, our end plate. So what we're going to do here is make use of our CastleNut. Take that selection, duplicate it and separate it by pressing P, and that gives us already the shape that we can now put the quick origin in the center. And now we select that again and simply extrude it out here. So now we have a new element and we don't have to do all the coordinate work again on it because we know it's the same size or pretty much the same size as our CastleNut. And I'm gonna make a copy of our reference, rotate it 90 degrees, and now take that end plate piece into isolation together with the reference. And I'm gonna position it as good as I can here, which is a little bit tricky because our pivot is over there on the right. So you can press Shift to be more precise. And now we add another cylinder with 36 sides, a radius of 10, and also a depth of 10. And let's rotate it at -90. We're going to use all transforms once again on that to reset X form. And that piece we are going to bring down here like that. So I'm going to make another copy of the element that we just did and scale that further down. Don't worry if it's not 100% aligned with the reference. It's okay. So that small piece is going to serve us as our boolean in a moment. But first, let's bring that over here to the other element where it's supposed to be. This one can stick out for the boolean that's about to follow. And now let's make a selection here on these words. And I'm going to press SY0 to align it. And that's basically it almost for the second hour. Let's also align this here with SY and 0, and we're going to continue in the next video.